Go ahead and get started here. Welcome. We are back in AP English. We are working with Plato's Republic, and we are interested in reviewing and critiquing Republic 1 through 5. I know that that's exactly what I asked you to do in the paper that you're writing, and so I want to play a similar kind of game. And the way that I will play this game is to actually apply the ideas of Plato to a certain kind of scenario or example. Now, in advance, let me apologize if I insult. I don't mean to insult, but I feel like for us to be able to have any kind of real discourse, there needs to be some kind of maybe quasi-extreme example. So we will begin with this example. We will take a look at Plato's ideas and see if, in fact, we can glean any kind of legitimate criticism from Plato and Republic 1.5. Just to remind, Republic 1.5 is Plato's attempt to qualify education as the key to an enlightened society. Okay? Education is the solution to the problems that plague society. Okay? Now, again, Plato will not define education as simply what you do at school, but rather education is that process of exposure of stimuli and not being exposed to stimuli. For Plato, the opposite is just as important as the first. Not only what you saw, heard, etc., in your youth is important and kind of formalized in some ways who you are, but what you didn't see, what you weren't exposed to, the process of deselection, not showing you certain things, is every bit as important as the process of selection. Now again, Plato argues that you can either play this game of education, exposure, non-exposure. You can either do that randomly, that is to say kind of haphazardly, that is to say without some kind of rationale as to why, or you can do it with some level of intentionality. That is to say, I know I want some kind of a product on the back end. I will do these things. I will expose the student to these things, the child to these things, not expose the child to certain other things, because I want to be able to predict at the back end. That's the goal. The capacity to predict final outcome is the ultimate goal. And again, Plato is working to try to create some sense of stability within a society of a bunch of people. Okay? Now, if insurance statistics are correct, and they usually are, which is why insurance companies make money, fully 1/3 of the people sitting in this room within 20 years will have a child. Don't say it won't be you. That immediately damns you to be one of the first to say. So don't say that. Whatever you do, don't say it won't be me. I will never get married and have children. That, of course, immediately curses you. But for the benefit of argument's sake, let's go ahead and ask you to consider a little scenario. You and your husband or wife are parents. You have a young 15-year-old daughter. It is a Friday night, and you and your husband and wife are sitting there watching television. Apparently in the future they still do that. And you're watching TV as your 15-year-old daughter saunters out of her room on the way to the front door, where she says over her shoulder, "I will be back later. I'm going out with my friends. See you." You happen to look over your shoulder at your daughter, 15 years old, and your daughter is topless.
What?
She has no clothes on her top. On her way out the door. See you, bye. See you, bye. And you go, whoa, 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 whoa. Honey, where do you think you're going? And she says, I just told you where I'm going. I'm going out. Way wrong answer. I need something better than that. Where are you going? Dressed like that. Or maybe I should say undressed like that. And she gives you a look. And she says, I'm going out with friends. We are going to a party. I will be back later. You say, I am uncertain as to say what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. No way. And your 15-year-old daughter looks at you kind of like you're some kind of ancient relic and says, what are you talking about? Ma already told me I could go to the party. Not dressed like that, you're not. And she says, look, I am not interested in that old-fashioned morality from 2012. I realize that's what it was like in the Dark Ages, but I live in a different time. And this is the way all the kids are doing it at the party. This is the way the parties are. We're proud of our bodies. I'm going to the party, see you later. Now there's our scenario. By the way, let's point out real quickly that we have asked what is fundamentally a Platonist question. And we want to try to answer it from a Platonist perspective. Let's go ahead and identify some of the immediate situational problems involved in this little scenario. Let's point out it gets dark at night obvious truths. You can make your daughter turn around, go back to her room and put on a top, but the first thing she's going to do when she gets in the vehicle with her pals is what? Right?
Well,
Mr. Batson answered that pretty quickly. Mr. Batson answered that pretty quickly. That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Am I right about this?
Yeah.
You can lock your daughter in her room and not allow her to leave the house. But remember, I intentionally set up the scenario that she's 15. Which means you have a number of months remaining before she is emancipated and allowed to leave home entirely. What do you do? And on what grounds do you do it? By the way, please note, that's a two-part question. We're really good at the what do you do part most of the time. We can invent an answer. Plato is far more interested in the second question. On what grounds, philosophically speaking, educationally speaking, on what grounds will you make the decision that you make? Now that is the Platonist enterprise. About any given action, you must be willing to ask, why am I doing it? What is the rationale? That's what we mean by intentionality. So there you are as parents. Your young 15-year-old is skipping out the door, ready to go have the time of her life, and you are going to respond how and why. Go ahead and jot down the first one. How are you going to respond to this one? Are you going to say, all right, have a good time. Hope you have a good time at the party. Remember, she's 15. Oh, by the way, if she does anything untoward and it's illegal, guess who gets nailed for that? You do. You're the parent. Negligence is going to lead to you receiving the fine or any number of other potential problems, depending on what she does, right? You are obligated legally to take care of that daughter of yours at 15, right? She's not 25, she's 15. So what are you going to do and why? How many of you are going to let her go to the party without her top on? It's just the new way it is. Now, Mr. Schreiber has said, yeah, that's kind of the way I'm going to see it. Mr. Schreiber, talk to me a little about your thinking on this. Mr. Schreiber maybe is going to argue
Maybe it's your own kid, you're taking your shirt off.
Go ahead, Mr. Schreiber. What are your thoughts about this one?
You learn most in life from your own mistakes.
So you do see it as a mistake.
Yep.
Interesting. That's interesting. Notice Mr. Schreiber is going to say that 15-year-old girls walking out of the front door to go to parties without their tops on is a mistake. Mr. Schreiber, why would you constitute it as a mistake? On what grounds would you say a 15-year-old girl leaving the house without her top on to go to a party is a mistake? Why would you say it's a mistake? What makes it a mistake?
Well, if it's not a mistake, then nothing will happen. But if it is a mistake, something will happen. Then I can learn
By
something.
nothing happening, do you mean her getting in the car, nothing happening? Do you mean her driving to the party, nothing happening? Do you mean, what does he mean? What language? He's using language, but notice he's being somewhat circuitous in his observations about if nothing happens. What exactly is it that
There
you're...
are no bad or, how do I say it?
Yes,
Just
how
say
does he
it.
say
Can't
it?
Just
say
say
bad. If there are any negative repercussions to her actions.
You are saying that she should have those negative repercussions? Is that what you're saying?
No, if he's saying if it doesn't happen, then it won't.
If there are no negative
So
repercussions.
you are willing to gamble on whether there are negative repercussions
Yeah.
with your own daughter at 15?
Yeah.
And is this for you in keeping with a certain moral code, or are you rather ready to say that by 15 a father's job in terms of responsibility is pretty much over? In other words, do you see this as a responsible action on an adult at 15 with a young girl? Do you see that as responsible? I'm not saying that you don't see it that way, I'm just asking you. So for example, at 15 we go, see, because I can easily reduce, as Plato always would, I can reduce I can change the variables, and I can say, for example, all right, well, she's 13. Does it change your thinking at all that she's 13 versus 15?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a function of chronology then. So for you, in your mind then, we'll go ahead and stick with 13 then. That is to say, do you have an obligation as the father of your child to tell your child, no, you will not go to the party without a top on? And if you do have that obligation, why do you have that obligation at 15 or 13 in your case? Your comment is, look, a kid's got to learn, she might as well learn. This is all part of school, just education, just like, going to first day of school or whatever.
Until she comes home and she got free.
Ms. Eve says, what about if she goes to the party and something happens? Of course, we could point out that's going to happen potentially whether she has her top on or not. Agreed?
There's just a better chance of something happening. She walks there without a shirt on.
Which is to say it's the wrong message. But how do you answer the observation made by your 15-year-old? That's the message of your time. The Dark Ages, when dinosaurs walked the world and you were in high school in 2012. Ma, that's like nobody even writes books about that stuff. It was so long ago.
I'm pretty sure that even in the future it'll be illegal
You
to
are
walk
sure.
around naked.
You are sure about this.
I'm not completely sure, but
Which is to say,
I would think
25
that-
years ago, things haven't changed in 25 years in regards to morality. By the way, we can ask a simple question. Do you spend any time with 7th graders? See, this is a philosophic kind of exercise. Do you spend any time around 7th graders? And if you do, would you qualify that group of kids as being very, very similar to what your group was when it was in 7th grade, or have they changed? And if you say they've changed, in what ways have they changed? We're talking 7th grade, 8th grade. By the way, that's only 4 years ago. Because when I usually ask this question, I have a number of seniors that begin to sound like old farts already. Oh no, man, those kids are nothing like we were. They are a different breed entirely. What they see, what they know, what they say, what they don't say. I mean, they're a whole different breed than we were when we were in 7th grade. Really, in what way? Well, it's pretty much we were babes in the woods compared to what these kids are in 7th grade now. They know more, they've seen more, they've been exposed to more. We're talking 25 years out. And I'm asking you in my scenario, what do you do? By the way, let's point out something. You are in a pivotal, can I say this? You are in a pivotal in this moment, existential moment. This is a powerful teaching moment, Plato will call it. Right? In other words, let's say it this way for your notes. You got to make a choice. No choice is a choice. To say, all right, see, I hope you have a good time, and I hope nothing bad happens to you because you left my house at 15 without your top on. Of course, let's point out a couple of observations that Plato might make. Leaving without the top on might show that there's other issues at play in terms of your education with your child. I'm not being judgmental. You might have raised your child to be very confident in who she is. And to that degree, she leaves to go to the party dressed as she says all of the other kids will dress. Is this good or bad?
Saving money on clothes.
Saving money on clothes. Mr. Schreiber's interested in his economics all of a sudden. Miss Sin, what are you going to do? You're the mom. Out she goes towards the door. She's 15. See you, Mom, I'm going.
I guess if you've had the problem before, maybe it's like in the middle, so maybe tell her to put like a belly shirt and like maybe like a
So you're
or like
So you're gonna try to like
To come up
improvise.
with- yeah.
So you're not. You
So
shouldn't
just
go completely
something
naked.
it's not like-
So,
maybe like.
so Miss Sin says, I'm going to have a conversation with her.
She did
Is that a
say it
fair way to
was
say it?
okay.
I'm gonna have a conversation with her. All right, so I'm gonna have a conversation, and we're gonna come to some compromise. Some compromise. How many of you like that idea? We're gonna have a conversation with the kid, and we're gonna come to some compromise. Remember, we're talking about a 15-year-old kid who now has learned something really important about what it means to be your child at 15. What has she learned in a second?
Better not walk out of the house with your shirt off.
That's one thing she's possibly learned. What else has she learned?
Just talk to one of the parents.
Bingo! I can find a way to use language to get what I want, to compromise. Of course, Miss Sin, let's point out, short of you getting in the car with her and following her to the party, you can put any number of garments on your daughter, and she's simply going to take them off once she gets in the vehicle. Does that change at all the calculus for you in regards to this?
And then she gets in trouble if she does that though.
How will you know? And what does it mean?
You always know.
And hello. Let's point out something. Notice Miss Sen said, and then she'll get in trouble. We may want to write that phrase down. It's an interesting one. Think about the way you see this whole scenario from the perspective of the kid until you begin to shift your focus, your view. What does it mean to say, by Miss Sen and others of us, she will get in trouble, or she will be disciplined? What does that mean? Does that mean you're going to do something to her that makes her in pain? Does that mean you're going to do something to her that makes her upset?
You're gonna teach her a lesson.
You're going to teach her a lesson? Is that what that means? Remember, we're talking about a 15-year-old, right? We're talking about a 15-year-old. Take away things. I'm going to deprive her of certain things.
That's probably what I do.
I'm going to deprive her of her what? Take away something that she wants or she needs.
We're not even gonna have cell phones. 25 years, okay?
That doesn't do anything when you take stuff away that.
Let's jot down a note then here, an observation. What about the argument that says removal of things never actually works? Or it works only if what?
If they really.
That's right. Removal of things only works if the individual child cares about those things. Mr. Keller, what are you going to do? Your 15-year-old's on her way out the door. What about going with her?
It depends how young of a parent I am.
Mr. Keller says there's concerns here on a number of levels.
Oh my god.
Do you think going with your daughter would limit her freedoms in any substantial way?
Yeah.
Hopefully she wouldn't want to be topless around the crowd.
Being topless at all around an adult would be, you're imagining, uncomfortable for her.
An adult.
We assume that because maybe that's the case for us. Let's point out something really important about generational parenting, and that is very regularly what a parent is going to consider as bad, a child will often consider as normal. Not that big of a deal. There are some of you who listen to music that if you were to allow your parents or your grandparents to listen to the lyrics of that music, they would be appalled.
Heart attack.
Right? They would be appalled, wouldn't they? But for you, it's just music that you listen to. Right?
Yeah, you can't understand most of it, so you should be okay.
It's just as bad as our music.
What? Let's listen to this argument. This argument says really, and there's no change, that the 7th graders that we were talking about a few minutes ago are really no different from we were. Is that true? Or do you notice an identifiable evolution in the generations? What do you think?
there is a difference.
There is a difference in
I
what
think there
direction?
I think there has been a change in moral, but honestly, if it's true what Plato says, that somebody's education is like what they are and who they become, then I would hope that my child, I would have educated them well enough to know that that's not okay.
Oh, hurrah! Let's listen to this observation. Are you ready for this? By the way, it's always interesting to have this. It's not unusual. Hello, hello. It's not unusual. There's a reason why I move tables in like this into my room. Conversations like this inevitably lead to us kind of wanting to all converse. That's totally normal, and that's why I asked the question. So I appreciate it, and the fact that you're even doing it now, I can totally understand. But I want to bring you back to observations, and here's one, and Ms. Eves is going to make it. You might want to jot it down in your own language. It goes something like this. The moment a child is doing something that the parent deems immoral, for lack of a better phrase, inappropriate, there is evidence immediately of a history of breakdowns in communication. In other words, if my child is interested in behaving in this way, that's evidence that something went wrong long before. Miss Eves says, if a 15-year-old is headed out the door, clearly kind of violating a moral code that the parents believe in, there should have been communication long before. But this seems to beg a really intriguing question. Is it true that children adopt the moral code of their parents? See, jot that question down and think about it for a few seconds. Is it true that kids adopt the moral code of their parents? Or rather, do they use the moral code of their parents to rebel against in some way? It's that whole metaphoric, don't touch the fireplace is inevitably going to get touched. Putting any prohibition on a child is inevitably an invitation to break the prohibition. If that's the case, what could Miss Eves have done or said before this moment to make sure that the child and Miss Eves have the ability to have some kind of level of communication? Second question, what about freedom? Write that word down. At what point as a parent, I'm not asking you as an 18-year-old yourself now, I'm asking you as a parent. At what point as a parent should you begin to think of your child as being free to do what he or she wants to do? Is it for you an age? Is it for you a certain kind of status in life? Upon graduating from high school, upon graduating from college, upon becoming married, blah, blah, blah. At what point are you no longer have any felt need as a parent to reduce the freedom of your child? When is it for you, do you think? Is 15 too young? Or rather, would we say, 15 years is a long time to live with a kid. By the age of 15, that child's moral development is completed, and you should be able to trust your child in all circumstances to make, quote unquote, the right choice. What do you think, Miss Varney? What are you going to do when this kid says, I'm going out, you're not going to tell me what I can wear?
Well, every 15-year-old is different.
Ms. Varney is going to use an interesting argument that says there is no way to make predictions because all human beings are different. How do you respond to that? That seems to me, Ms. Varney, though, to sidestep the question of what you will do in a circumstance where your young 15-year-old is walking out the door. Notice, this is why I began with a scenario that posits a real-life situation. What will you do on that evening in that moment? Or are you capable of prediction? Or are you going to say, if every kid is different, every parent is also different, and that means every scenario and situation is different, and to that degree I can't answer a question like that until I'm in the moment. By the way, Plato has an answer for that. He has an answer for that, by the way. He says, right, that's called random,
Right.
and that's what most parents do. And Plato says, that's what's wrong with Athens. That's why Plato's walking at the mall with his pal carrying the Abercrombie bag when he's challenged. And he doesn't have an answer because he's never thought about it. Because most parents parent this way. Every situation is unique. I'll make up my mind when the moment happens. But Plato argues these are pivotal moments in a child's life. doesn't it make some sense to have some thought about it before it happens? Because let's be fair, some things can happen that evening to your 15-year-old that forever changes not only her life, but your life. Agreed? We are all together familiar with the choices that can be made at 15 that could lead to any number of serious problems, challenges, that for the rest of her life and your life, there will be repercussions. In other words, this cannot be treated so flippantly, Plato would argue, as to say, I'll deal with it when it happens.
Yeah.
That's Plato's view. Mr. Peterson, go ahead.
Yeah, but can you, like if you think about it that way, can you prepare for every single situation?
Great question. Mr. Peterson has asked a brilliant question, and here's one of the hard questions. How does one really ever prepare for anything in life? Now, how do the Boy Scouts answer that question, by the way? By the way, the Boy Scouts are a program that are extremely Platonist in their orientation, by design. By design. In fact, what is their motto? Do I have any Boy Scouts in the house? What was the motto for the Boy Scouts? I have no Boy Scouts. I have no Eagle Scouts in here. None. No Girl Scouts either. Be prepared. That's right. That's right. There's the famous phrase, be prepared. The argument was that, you always have to kind of think about the potential hazards that are coming, especially if we're, doing anything outdoors, or you could die. You see this kind of thing. So the argument is be prepared. Mr. Peterson's asked a really important question, though. Can you, in fact, prepare for the things of life? Can you, in fact, prepare for the contingencies that are coming? Well, let's look back. Let's ask about your freshman year. All right, your freshman year. And this is the Platonist way to try and answer your question, Mr. Peterson. Notice Socrates very rarely will answer a student's question directly, but rather ask a series of potential questions, thought experiments, we might say. Think about your own experience in your freshman year. Choices. Some were good, some not so good. Ask this question. Could you have done anything in your freshman year before it began to be better prepared for the experience of your freshman year? Or are you inclined to say that the experience of your freshman year in high school has to be what it is? It's a lived experience, and there's absolutely no preparation. In other words, was there any way, looking back, you could have been more intentional in your preparation for the experience that we will call freshman year and, by extension, high school? The easy way to answer that question is to simply, if you don't want to write it down, think about it. What for you in your freshman year was the very worst choice you made? Just put it in your brain. It's funny how everyone seems to smile when I ask that question. What is the worst choice that you made? Mr. Shriver mutters something to himself and does this. Whatever that is, and for us, it's a different choice, right? Depending on what we're thinking. Can you qualify right now in your brain the worst choice you made your freshman year? Go ahead. You don't have to say it out loud. Because we're not interested in what the choice was, by the way. We're not. Plato's not interested in the choice. So stay with me for a moment. What was for you the worst choice you made your freshman year? And now this question. Is there anything you could have done to keep that choice from happening? In other words, watch this. Was that choice an inevitability? Was it required to happen? Or did you have some freedom of choice to make it? Now, please notice, I'm not asking you if in your freshman year something happened to you to which you had no choice. You're driving along to school, someone rear ends you, you lose the capacity to walk for the rest of your life. That is not necessarily, you could say, a choice you made unless you want to argue that you got in the vehicle to drive in the first place. Maybe you weren't as defensive a driver as you should have been, blah, blah, blah. I'm talking about a clear choice that you made your freshman year that you now deem as not so good. Question. Was that an inevitability? Or rather, did you have the freedom to make that choice? And could you have avoided that choice? Now, if you answer, yes, I could have avoided that choice, we could argue that you believe in some ways in freedom in the universe, right? You believe in the freedom of choosing what will happen to me one way or the other. On the other hand, if you argue that it was inevitable that it would happen, and nothing I could have done or said could have circumvented that action happening, and yet you still made the choice. To what degree do you believe in freedom in the universe, then, and in your own life? In other words, are you a piece on a chessboard being moved, or do you rather see yourself as consciously making decisions, choices? Let's point out something really foundational about Plato's view. He believes in freedom by limiting it. I would write that phrase down. The way I've often said it is, you are as free as you allow yourself to be. You are as free as you allow yourself to be. In other words, Plato believes the only way that one can enjoy freedom in the universe, either as an individual or as a group, is to consciously limit certain kinds of freedoms. Consciously, rationally, intentionally. Without that kind of limitations, Plato will argue, there is only sheer determinative force in the life of the individual. That is to say, Thrasymachus. The one who is the strongest has the power to decide what's right and what's wrong. Ms. Triple.
But he plays the fate card. I know he says it's a lie.
Fate or fake?
Fate, but he plays it.
Of course he does, doesn't he? So in other words, at the same moment that he says there is some notion of freedom, there is as well this notion that you did not choose to be born. That, by the way, you cannot escape. Because that's absolutely true. You didn't choose to be born, unless you believe in some mythic pre-birth type of choosing as the Greeks did. Which they did. You choose to be born into what body and that kind of thing. When you get to Republic 10, you'll hear about that myth, right? And it's an interesting notion that you kind of chose, believe it or not, to be here in this time and in this place. But for most of us, we will say, if that's a choice I made, I didn't remember making it. And to that degree, I don't know that I can qualify it as a choice. Ms. Damiano.
Okay, so what if we do prepare for these situations that may happen and then something different happens? So
Sure.
you prepare for your daughter to walk out of the house
Sure.
with no top on, and
Sure.
then she tries to walk out of the house with no skirt on.
Right.
Like,
Right.
like what then? Like how can you prepare for something if you don't know what's
Right.
going to happen?
Or I'll up one on Damiano even further, because that's normally the way we think, but that's because we're all 18. What about the daughter that never comes out of the door? What about the daughter that sits in her room and you say to her at 15, honey, aren't you going out tonight? No, I'm not interested in it. You're just going to sit in your room all year long? Yes, I am. You're going to have no social interactions of any kind? No, I will not. See, the only reason you haven't thought about that as an even worse challenge is because you're not yet a parent. But if you're asking, I think, what is really an important question, how can we predict futures? How hard is it to predict that a 15-year-old is going to push against the authority of a parent? How hard is that to predict? Right? If we know that that's inevitably coming, Plato asks a very interesting question. Why not prepare for it, as opposed to waiting until it happens and then responding with some kind of quick impulse response? Plato says, you can respond in the moment, we'll call that random, but you cannot predict or control for variables and outcomes. Notice the scientific, almost rigid scientific approach here. It says, kids are going to behave, no doubt, in certain ways. Can we do any kind of prediction? Well, let's study our own biography. In your own life, was it the case that sometime around the age of 13, 14, 15, you begin to push against the boundaries of the authority figures in your life? Don't tell me what to do, if you will. Is that true for you? If that was true for you, won't that possibly be true for one of your children? Now, some of you might say, I never really hit that phase where I pushed against the boundaries. So how will I know how to predict? Well, remember, we don't have just psychology, we have sociology. Maybe you didn't push against the boundaries, but a good number of your peers probably did. What are the odds that a child of yours will then do that? Pretty good. Pretty good. Of course, here's an observation let's point out. Why is pushing against the boundaries a bad thing? Why can't we define it as a good thing?